Tonight in Democracy20, the Office of the Auditor General, strengthening democracy through oversight and accountability.
We've largely faced challenges that are about encouraging strong capacity to be brought into the public sector,
improving the lives of rural communities, and looking back in history on this day, how the first hearing of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was disrupted 18 years ago. Well, good evening and welcome to this edition of Democracy20, a program in which we look back at the accomplishments of 20 years of democracy in South Africa. In tonight's show, we look at another Chapter 9 institution, namely the Office of the Auditor General. Please do take part in the discussions as we've been asking you to do so. You can do this via email this to elections@sabc.co.za, or if you prefer, you can send an SMS this to 33726. And remember to begin your message with the word vote. Each SMS will cost you R1.50 though. For tweets, use the hashtag SABC elections. And for those who like using your Facebook and are well social media savvy, you can find us on SABC News Online. Send us your comments. We'd like to use them throughout the show and become as interactive as possible as we go on. Now, for our first story of the evening, the focus of the Office of the Auditor General in the past 20 years has been to ensure that the right disciplines in financial management are put in place in government. Auditor General Kimi Makwetu says during the period, the office has been able to drive the message that transparency is critical when people are entrusted with public money. He says another key factor over the 20 years has been developing the necessary required skills in financial management in the public sector.
Hired to keep government in check in the way it uses and manages public money. Each year, the Auditor General compiles audit reports on how government has spent public money. Together with his team, they go through financial records of national and provincial government departments, public entities and municipalities. They then compile reports on whether money allocated to them went where it was meant to go. The Office of the Auditor General is one of the Chapter 9 institutions designed to strengthen democracy by enabling oversight and accountability. The current Auditor General is Kimi Makwetu. He was deputy to Terence Nombembe, who left the position in December last year. Makwetu says in the past 20 years, capacity building in financial management and awareness of the importance of the kind of work they do among stakeholders has been most important.
We've largely faced challenges that are about encouraging strong capacity to be brought into the public sector. In many institutions, an attempt has been made. A lot of effort has gone into attracting people with solid skills. However, certain institutions are still struggling, particularly those in far-flung areas. We have not stopped. We believe that it's a winnable cause, and we believe if we put enough focus and put enough pressure and persuasion to those that are decision makers, we will find in the future South Africa in terms of financial management that looks better than what we are experiencing now.
Analysts say the impact of the results of the work done by the Auditor General is visible in some quarters.
The number of central and provincial government departments that are producing qualified audits, i.e. audits that aren't clean, has reduced, and that is presumably partly because they are responding to earlier adverse opinions by the Auditor General. That hasn't happened at local level yet, where I think the problems are going from bad to worse in many ways. But I think the public is now much more aware of the need for government institutions to be accountable to the electorate. And I think the awareness of accountability is partly because the Auditor General has produced these reports, and these reports have been quite well publicized.
Access to municipal services like clean running water is an issue important to these women. Municipalities are tasked to ensure that the money given to them is spent wisely to improve people's lives and is financially prudent. But when the Auditor General issues a report on any institution, including municipalities, it can be problematic. These reports don't equate to court orders.
The reports are often very good and they are quite thorough and they give us a lot of facts to go on, because they are supposed to assist the government of the day to rectify the mistakes. The problem is that sometimes, especially when it's highly politicized, the government of the day is not necessarily going to implement these recommendations, because these reports are not in themselves court orders that have to be obeyed. And I think there's a problem there, that especially in highly politicized cases, the recommendations and findings are not always followed up as vigilantly as they should, and the government is not treating the Chapter 9 institutions properly as assisting them actually to solve problems and to make government better to the benefit of ordinary people.
We took to the streets to ask members of the public what their impression is of the work of the Auditor General. Most expressed frustration in what seems is a lack of follow-up of findings in the work done by this institution.
You get government institutions like municipalities who constantly get the same bad recommendations and findings, but nothing happens.
They keep on doing the very same mistakes that have been found out from the previous years.
The action has not been taken about the findings that they have done.
Most of the municipalities have been claiming that they don't get money from the government to deliver their services. But now, if recently, if you check, they do get that kind of money. But the only reason not for them not to deliver is because they are not, encouraging in a very positive way. They don't get guidance on how to use those funds.
And the lack of direction can result in some parts of the country looking like this. The Auditor General says at the moment his office is not completely satisfied with the kind of results it gets in audit reports.
The level of happiness is varying from one institution to another. However, our ultimate happiness as an audit office is when we know that when the resources have been appropriated for any institution, by far the majority, if not the entire package of funds, have gone towards the things that those monies were appropriated for. Where we sit currently, we are struggling to come to that conclusion. So happiness is still deferred.
The Office of the Auditor General has recently stepped up transformation, appointing the first woman Deputy Auditor General in over 100 years of the office's existence. Gloria Stefako, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Democracy20 takes a quick break. Don't go. In fact, when you come back, we'll be speaking to, as you saw there before we go into the break, my colleague Devon spoke to the newly appointed Deputy Auditor General. Catch the interview about a minute and a half's time right here on SABC3 as well as SABC News Channel 404. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back shortly after this.
Jessica the hippo was found after she was washed down the river shortly after birth. Today, she is a large hippo and still returns for feeding and human interaction.
She also loves body exfoliating. Yes, she has a mask as well.
Jessica is the world's most famous hippo, and perhaps she's the only one who has forgotten how aggressive she's supposed to be.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Zoom into Africa. This is Burundi. The president is Mr. Pierre Nkurunziza. Burundi got independent from Belgium on 1st July in 1962. The population is more than 8 million people. One of Burundi's major languages spoken is French. Monetary unit is Burundi franc.
Welcome back. You're still watching Democracy 20. Now, tonight we're looking at the role the Auditor General has played over the past 20 years of democracy, and we're examining what more can be done. Last month, Tsakani Ratsela became the first woman to be appointed Deputy Auditor General in the organization's 103-year history. She's pledged to maintain the highest standards of technical excellence at the office, and she takes over from Kimi Mukwetu, who was appointed Auditor General in December now. Earlier today, my News at 1 colleague, Devon Murugan, asked Ms. Ratsela about her goals in a demanding new job.
The maintenance of our high standards and to ensure that South Africans enjoy the high level of service that they've always come to expect from our office is something that's top priority indeed. Mine is to ensure that our work is intensified so that we can increase the impact of what we do, ultimately for the benefits of citizens in this country. Ultimately, we want to ensure that the Audit Office contributes effectively to the creation of a state that's capable of meeting its promises of sustaining development for the benefit of this and future generations.
Yeah, let's look at that role. I mean, when the country had changed and the mandate for municipalities had extended, you had the Auditor General's office really providing this sort of assistive role, this role to assist municipalities with how they record their operations. At what point do we start shifting that advisory role to something that enforces accountability more?
We kind of see that the advisory role that we play is part of adding value into the system. And I think we'll continue to do that until, indeed, there's no need for us to be in that space. What's important at the end of the day is for all of us as South Africans to focus efforts on creating capacity that's going to run all state institutions, whether they are in the local sector, the provincial sphere or the national sphere. But all of them have the type of systems that are capable of delivering on promises, that are capable of reporting in a manner that's transparent, that are capable of spending public funds in a manner that's efficient, that's effective, and that's economic. And those are the type of institutions that we must all focus on creating. So beyond the language of whether or not something has a clean audit or not, it's really about driving towards a state that is able to demonstrate capacity to deliver on promises in a manner that benefits citizens in the long term.
Do you think we have a speed which is slow at the moment in reaching that goal? Let's take a look at the state-owned enterprises that report to the Department of Minerals. I mean, good news on that front. We had 3 bodies giving forth clean audits. How far is the gap between those with clean audits and those that just don't have those clean audits? Is there a huge gap?
I think that the gap really still exists in the ability to create credible systems that are able to ensure that there's transparency in reporting, that planning of government programs is adequate, that the monitoring and implementation of that happens effectively, and that the reporting on that is transparent. So even when we do issue clean audits, we still think that for us to sustain those gains that we're making, we ought to ensure that we spend much more time and effort on strengthening the internal controls of government. So this is really about ensuring that we have people with the right skills and competencies doing the work for which they're employed, people who are able to stay in the roles long enough to become effective, people who are informed by standard operating procedures that inform exactly what they do each and every day in a manner that's predictable, people whose work is monitored effectively, supported by credible information systems, so that which they do they can report on in a manner that also allows public representatives that are charged with providing oversight on their work to do so, whether they are ministers as executive authorities or whether members of parliament, so that they too can have the ability to really monitor what the state is doing, what government entities are doing with public funds.
Yeah. When you look back, I mean, you look back from 1994, it's been 20 years. It kind of relates to the question I just asked you. If you look at the amount of clean audits we've had back then and now, what stands out for you in terms of this road from 1994 till now, in terms of the Auditor General's office?
While there's been improvements, Devon, our own focus remains, and I think will remain in that place until we sort it out, is about having sustainable systems. Because even when a clean audit is earned 1 year, the ability to sustain it is informed by whether or not there are systems that operate predictably and operate well at all times, even when auditors are not there. So we think that that's got to remain our focus, so that beyond the colors on the diagrams that we issue, beyond whether somebody has a clean audit and we can count how many there are, the thing that's really going to make a big difference to all of us as citizens is our ability to create institutions that are strong, that are capable of delivering on promises.
The appointed Deputy Auditor General Tsakani Ratsela, and she was being interviewed on the News at 1 team by Devon Murugan. Now, before we go to our next row, we've got a couple of tweets that we've had for you right now. Let's take a quick look at those about the role of the Auditor General, as we've been asking you to send through. Let's see those tweets come through on the wall. This one coming from Hanyani Makumbana. He says, well, Malamela deserves their own municipality. This is long overdue. This has been 20 years of depression for us. I'm not quite sure. Well, we'll just keep on moving them. I'm sure we'll find one that's got to do with today's topic. Moving on to another one. This one coming from Musa Mohala saying, well, it says what? Malamela should vote for parties that will serve them. SABC exposal, parties to people, so that there is a choice. I think these tweets came through on our sister channel, SABC2. Well, let's take a look at this one. This one says, we see the same negative audits in most government entities every year. However, no one is held accountable. Hashtag SABC election. That one coming from DevZ Guna 786. Thank you very much. Do send them in. We will appreciate them. We'll keep on reading them as we come. We understand that sometimes maybe they'll mix up with our other channel, that is Elections 2014, that goes on air at SABC2 by our sister channel by Leanne Menes. But anyway, we'll carry on some more news stories from this side. A rural development project piloted by the Office of the President in 2009 has significantly improved the lives of people living in a village east of Giani in Limpopo. Residents of Muyekla now have clean running water and improved health services, among other things.
Muyeke, nowadays a better village to live in, with clean running water, electricity, flourishing vegetable gardens, and soon a brand new clinic. 5 years ago, this village had none of this. Residents bought borehole water and had no access to a police station or post office nearby.
I think the situation is much better now. Back then, we used a lot of energy to get water from the borehole. Now we have taps. We don't have to buy water from people who have boreholes in their yards. We are spending our hard-earned money.
Soon, this community will have a multi-million rand clinic. And unlike the old one, this one will operate 24 hours a day. The post office, satellite police station, and the Tusong Center were all built in 2010. Before that, residents traveled more than 35 kilometers to the nearest town for essential services. The village chief is happy that the rural development program has improved the lives of his people.
We can boast of vegetable gardens, we have a clinic, a sport center. Most villages wish they could also have what we have.
But some residents say there's still work to be done.
We welcome the development that we are seeing in our village, but we must also state that some of the projects are still incomplete. We still do not have a tarred road, street lights. We also need shops where we can buy. They did manage to provide us with houses, even though some did not benefit.
A library, cultural center, and a community hall are all under construction. And government has promised to tar the road leading to the Kruger National Park.
Another tweet before we take a break right here in Democracy20. This one coming from Kolani Ngwegazi saying, doesn't the state accountant have powers to recommend criminal charges? Speaking about our topic for today, the Auditor General's office within South Africa's 20 years of democracy. Democracy20 takes a quick break. Don't go away. More stories after this break. Stay tuned.
Typhoon Haiyan has made landfall in Vietnam days after it left thousands dead and widespread devastation in the Philippines.
Chad le Clos claimed 5 medals at the Japan leg of the FINA World Cup Series, 4 gold and a silver. Most importantly, it was a clean sweep in the butterfly events.
The infamous Lady Gaga.
What has she done this time? What has she done? She wears meat. She wears exaggeratedly high shoes. What has she done?
She's come out in the world's first flying dress.
That's Morning Live, daily at 6 a.m. on SABC News.
You're watching Democracy20, a program in which we celebrate 20 years of democracy in the country. Time now to look at, well, my favorite part of the show, look back in history. Now, the first hearing of the Human Rights Committee was, in fact, of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, commenced on this day 18 years ago. The sitting was briefly disrupted by a bomb threat, though. This report was filed by SABC News reporter, the late Veronica van der Westhuizen, on the 15th of April in 1996.
A packed City Hall witnessed South Africans lifting the veil on atrocities of the past. In his opening address, Commission Chairman Archbishop Desmond Tutu said the aim of the hearing was to lay the ghost of the past and promote peace and reconciliation.
And so we ask you to bless this Truth and Reconciliation Commission with your wisdom and guidance as it commences its important work of redressing the many wrongs done both here and throughout our land. We pray that all those people who have been injured in either body or spirit may receive healing through the work of this commission.
The first witness to be sworn in was Mrs. Nomshle Mohapi from East London. Her husband Mapetla died in police custody. Police said he hanged himself in the cells, but Mrs. Mohapi wants the Truth Commission to investigate his death. Having been detained herself, Mrs. Mohapi described how police tortured, electrocuted and suffocated people during interrogations. Mrs. Mohapi's testimony was interrupted when the hall had to be cleared for fears of a bomb threat. Police say they received 2 phone calls from a call box between 10:30 and 11 o'clock, but nothing was found. When the hearing resumed, police had their hands full trying to control additional people who tried to enter the courtroom. 3 other witnesses, Mrs. Elizabeth Harshe, Mrs. Monica Godolosi, Mrs. Nomali Galela, were neighbors in 1985 when their husbands disappeared at the same time. Evidence was led in the former Vlakplaas commander Eugene de Kock's trial, allegedly implicating the unit in the disappearance of the men. The 3 women want the perpetrators to tell them what had happened to their husbands. They say they want a dignified burial for their husbands.
How could we report the police to the police?
The last witness for the day, Mr. Carl Webber, lost his left arm during an attack on the Highgate Hotel in East London 5 years ago. He has only 60% use of his right arm.
I would like justice should be done. I don't feel someone can do this and just walk away, a free person. And it should be fully investigated as what political organization, who was behind this.
Mr. Webber can't identify his attackers as they wore balaclavas. He wants his attackers behind bars and is against amnesty. 2 more witnesses scheduled for today will testify tomorrow. After the hearing, the commissioners said they would oppose interdicts filed against them.
The state is actually opposing this with a state attorney we've arranged for this to happen. Our own law advisor left the hearings and has flown down to Cape Town, and Mr. Denzel Potgieter, who is a commissioner and a lawyer, is there as well.
Bishop Tutu described the first hearing as successful and said the attendance showed the support that the Commission enjoyed. Today's hearing is just the beginning of a long process of healing in a country where the majority of people were subjected to human rights abuses. Veronica van der Westhuizen in SABC TV News, East London.
Now, before we say goodbye, let's take a quick look, or one more look rather, at your social media messages. We start off with some tweets. This one coming from Oscar Letts, saying one of the most ignored officers by the current administration. Very sad era for our democracy. Speaking, of course, about the Auditor General's office. The other one saying the Auditor General have done a good job on checking these municipalities who are wasting money on other things at SABC News Online. Remember, you can do that. Send us your tweets, send us your messages, hashtag SABC elections. They'll get read right here on SABC's Democracy20 program or the Elections 2014 program that runs at 6:30, in fact at 6 o'clock on SABC2. That's a wrap from tonight. Catch me again tomorrow evening, same time, same place, SABC3 at 6:30 or SABC News Channel 404 at 6:30. The English news follows immediately after this. Good night.